Salutations and welcome to Midtopia Meets. I'm your host, Marrque Nunley. I am the creative director and studio manager for Midtopia. And we are here today with the great Lindsay Jamieson.
Hello.
What it is. My man is a branding consultant, but started out as a drummer extraordinaire. Man's got hits. Man's got awards up and down, and then transitioned into branding management. How does that even happen?
I have been asked that question before, and I don't think there is an obvious route to get to wherever I am at now.
So when you say it's not obvious, you just by happenstance, you found yourself in the position.
It's interesting. Maybe it's relevant to more people than just me. I always think that my own story is, only interesting to me sometimes. But so I was obviously a musician as a kid. I mean, I started drumming when I was 11, and my brother was really good at piano, and so I couldn't take up piano, although I did later.
Nice.
But I basically took up drums to accompany my brother in some ways, which made me good at playing with Ben Folds later, probably, or helped, playing to the piano. I learnt to play drums to piano rather than guitar, so that's quite different.
Interesting.
And then I very reluctantly, I think I overturned my bedroom at 16 as a protest, a sort of dirty protest to my parents about the inevitability of going to university, college, it's like, we call it university.
Right.
And that was sort of like, back in the day, that's what you had to do to get a career. So your parents are always like, you've got to go to college, you've got to get a degree, and then do your thing, right? And then you go and do your art and all that stuff.
Gotcha.
And I was like, oh, seriously? I've got to just do years more of this? So anyway, I did. I had a good chat with my dad at 16 because of my dirty protest. And he sort of helped me figure out that maybe it was it helped me realise that it was possibly in my interest to have a backup career under my belt,
Smart.
Not just to throw everything into music. And so I did. I went ahead and got a marketing degree, which I am that old that back in 1982, I think it was. Yeah. 82 was when I went to university at Lancaster, which is now a very well-renowned business school, actually, the main place you would go to do marketing.
Gotcha.
But certainly back in the 80s, it was not. They were making it up. I mean,
it was
a
new thing.
I didn't even know what the word marketing meant, but my uncle, who was a psychology professor, told me, marketing's the next thing, go and do it. And it's like, you'll like it. And
wow.
So it wasn't really... It wasn't an academic subject in the 80s.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I did go and get a degree. Then I felt pressure because everybody around me was applying for jobs in the last year.
Before, yeah.
I did marketing in French, not that that's relevant anyway, but I had a year abroad, and then I came back, and then last year everybody's applying for jobs. And so you go, should I? Even though I don't want one. Yeah, it's this, So anyway, I got caught up in that and went and got a graduate trainee job at British Airports Authority doing tax and duty-free marketing. And I got there and I sat there the first hour. They gave me a little cubicle. I sat there and I was like, there is no bloody way. There's no bloody way that this is my life. And
know the feeling.
So within that first hour, I decided to get the hell out of there. And it took me 7 weeks to do it respectfully with them sort of going, waving, and, good luck,
right,
and see you on top of the pops
good
type
terms,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, good terms, yeah.
Right on.
But... so anyway, I don't know. And then I was unemployed, inevitably.
Sure, that's part of it.
Musician for a good 12 years. And, within that, I wasn't completely unemployed. Did bands with my brother, went to Germany, Japan.
Sure.
You start to be a musician, but you don't make any money. And, of course, my contemporaries are, still the case, actually.
Right.
They've got multiple houses
They're
and
doing
things
the
like
things,
that.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know, quite quite well. Why I'm saying it is because maybe it's relevant that there's this tension because the world is telling you to go and get a proper job. And you know in your heart and your gut and everything, that's not what you were put on this earth to do.
It's not for everybody. Absolutely.
And so that's why it's a bit weird for me because so of course I go off and be a musician, and then my contemporaries, my marketing contemporaries, my peers, by the 90s had started the world's first advertising planning agency.
Wow.
Which was a new model. It's called Red Spider. It was a completely new model, and now it's quite a common thing. But it was a consultancy that was not, that could work with advertising agencies, not against them, not competitively, because it didn't do creative. It didn't do creative. It only did strategy. So in that sense, you're not competing. You're not making ads and stuff like that.
Right.
So and then they could work directly with clients. I mean, I'm sure this is not very interesting to the world of musicians and stuff. So I'll get.
You'd be surprised.
But anyway, so I was sort of fortunate enough that I knew people who were doing quite important things in the advertising world.
Right on.
And then they thought I was cooler than them because I was, going around the world playing music, and maybe I was cooler than them.
A little bit of that grass is greener syndrome.
So they wanted me for my cred. They liked bringing in the musician to a conversation with Nike or whoever it was that they were dealing with, because it's just like they've got an artist.
They've got
on the team.
that eye, that perspective, literally sitting there right in front of them.
Exactly. So in a way that it became quite a good marriage, and then I continued, and I suppose I still continue. I'm still a musician, and I'm still a brand consultant. So this has been going on for
just marrying the world
a long time. And even when I was on tour, I would in the bus, I would either do my, because it's idea consultancy, or I'd ask all of the clever musicians around me who have great creative minds, how should we solve this one?
Right.
And I remember actually, this was back in England, but we would tour at night. So I would go and play Liverpool at night with my band. Mm-hmm. And then the discussion on the way home was whatever I wanted them to help me with.
Nice.
And then I would get home at 2 or 3 in the morning, get up at 7, go up to London and present these ideas. And they were like, "Oh my God, where did you
just
come
had
up
your
with?"
own? You had your own private army of phone a friend right then and there
of
you would
left
just go
field thinking,
right,
of artistic new ideas that were not contained by the knowledge of what can't be done,
whatever they've been doing.
So it was a pretty good model, and they called me Scary Spider because it was Red Spider. I was Scary Spider then.
I guess see how that works out.
Yeah, I think when you bring in left field ideas, that people sort of get scared in a good way.
Sure. I mean, speaking of there's one phrase I saw that you described what you do, creative planning. In my head now, when my first experience with branding was negative. Well, I perceived it as negative, I should say.
What was it?
And just as a kid, I realized that I was being advertised to, because I was I knew things earlier than I was supposed to, and so when I realized I was being pandered to, it upset me, and I was like, why would you? What? That's because it's bright colored doesn't mean I like it. What? And it just it turned me off of the whole idea for such a long time. And so in the last, couple of years and embracing, doing music as a more of a full-time career, I've had to, open my eyes to, what branding actually is and, how much it actually applies to more than just what you do as a career. And then when I saw that you called it creative planning, in my head, I was like, if somebody would have told me that that's what it was.
It's a more accurate phrase,
and
isn't it?
It breaks it down in a way that it's like, oh, it's not, just pandering. It can be if you take it there, but when I saw creative planning, I just remember thinking that would have been so much more palatable to me. And it was like, wait a minute, that's branding.
Yes, I actually totally agree with you. I think branding has been badly branded. And so what you're suggesting is a better term, or you observing that you're being branded too,
Right.
is a sense of that you might be being manipulated.
Right, yeah.
So then there's a distrust of like, hang on, those
There's
people
an apprehensiveness
might
there.
be, but they're not necessarily manipulated, but they might be. But then there's the other side of it that, especially as a kid, and you sort of see it this way around, and those bright colours are making me happy as a kid because I wanted bright colours in my life. And so I'm being understood by this cereal box.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Cereal boxes are a very early moment of where you sort of engage with the brand and start to create loyalty and things like that.
Right.
And, start to like the little the mascots.
I was going to say, you look for the adventurers in the commercials. And
Yeah,
it's like
and there's a little
TV
map
episode.
on the back. Yeah, I mean, I love it all.
What's he going to escape from now?
McDonald's Land. They had a TV show.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I lived in the States I lived in the States for 3 years when I was 7 to 10. And I think that exposure to
American media.
Yeah, was amazing.
I believe it.
I loved it. I absolutely, just had a great time. So in a way, I think like there's that funny tension of knowing that those people creating the cereal boxes were presumably adults,
sure, hopefully
engaged in creative planning, but they're sort of, you're relating to them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's a funny world and I think this will always be a tension, and the tension is between art and commerce to me. I think that, like, as artists, we don't like to think that somebody's misrepresenting our art, but we would like people to know about it.
Absolutely.
And then as the audience, you're like, why are you pushing that? I want to buy my own music. I don't want you to tell me what music to buy.
Right.
So, I mean, music's like, really difficult to brand, I think.
Surely, that makes sense.
If you're seen to tell anybody...
Yeah.
Like, there's one thing about, like, Starbucks has got a new cherry flavour, right? And so you see a billboard, it goes, here it is. And it's like, that's called, it's just awareness advertising.
Right.
But if you did that for a Radiohead single, it's like, what is wrong with Radiohead? Why are they pushing? Don't tell me to listen to Radiohead. So it's another game where but so at the end of the day, it's about the sense of respect between the consumer/audience buyer and the marketer or brander or creator of this art or whatever we're doing. And it's all about just the sense of respect that you get, and that is why it's so complicated, because that sense of respect is so nuanced that it's all about that's why understanding
going into the
consumers and audience behaviors and what they need and everything like that. And, and one assumes as an outsider or as a consumer that there is a sort of just money only, profit motivation, which again, in the music industry gets a lot more complicated. That we're not arts. Nobody got into music because of profit motivation.
Right.
I can promise you that.
No.
So it's a funny one. It doesn't fit all of the, there's always a sort of
it's not a one-size-fits-all type of...
it's not like you should do it like this and then everybody will get it and it's like as simple as that. It's not simple to market music.
Absolutely. Right.
It's a lot easier to market cereal.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm proposing we now move into. It's like Midtopia cereal.
Wrong business. Sometimes with musicians, it can seem, branding can seem such a big world that is so foreign to them, and because it was to me at least. And what are some of the things that you think can break down how intimidating it is if you're just venturing into the world? Like as you're developing your craft, you're like, okay, I want to share my craft with the world. How do I do that effectively? What is the tiny small steps you can take, and because you can't start out as, you don't start out as Coca-Cola. You got to start out as something little. And what little thing can they do to just get the ball rolling on understanding how to brand themselves and what branding is?
No, it's a good question. I think the first thing, well, if you think about what branding is, like a successful moment of branding, shall we say, is a resonant connection between the two sides of the conversation. So it's about you're looking for resonance. So with your audience.
Right.
Now, we know that as artists, we already get that. It's like almost literally we are creating resonance from the stage or from the studio that we go, that does something to me, my gut, because that's why we want, that's why I want to do it.
Right.
And then I'm assuming that if I or we have that resonant connection with this musical expression, then somebody else out there is going to have that resonance as well. And that's what we believe in as musicians.
Sure.
So when you think about what we're doing in marketing or branding or, outside of the art itself, we're looking for exactly the same thing. We're looking for a resonant connection. Around the, and so then you go, well, okay, so then we're going to take the art and we're going to understand it, that it is a brand, okay? You go, a brand, well, and everything is a brand at the end of the day. Or you can go mental. You can go mental. But what that means is if I'm being perceived as a brand, then I need to understand the essence of what I am, and therefore how I would like to be perceived. Because here's the thing about branding, right?
Oh, man.
A brand is nothing more than a perception. That's what it is.
Right.
It's a perception in somebody else's head about whatever you're up to or the stimulus that you're creating. So that means you can't own a brand. You can't own Midtopia. Nobody owns Midtopia. It's like everybody but Midtopia owns Midtopia because it's all about the perception. So the only thing that you can do, if you are and we are Midtopia, all we can do is say we would like to be perceived, in the world as ...
Right.
And therefore what activities or what communication or what stimulus will, help that journey of being perceived in this desired way.
Yeah.
And that is, as you described very well earlier, that's creative planning. That is in other words, thinking about what the creative goal is, the objective, and planning of how to get there. So not to simply, because it isn't a simple process.
It's never simple, yeah.
We can make it sound simple.
Right.
Like number
planning.
1, understand yourself.
Know yourself. Know thyself.
So know thyself, and then there's methodology to understanding yourself. There's at the end of the day, you're sort of writing a brief for yourself as you're looking at yourself and trying to work out who am I and what am I trying to do, what are my objectives, etc.
Gotcha.
So then you sort of go, this is from my angle, and then it's like, who's my audience? Okay, well, and then you go, okay, well, that's a whole journey in itself to understand your audience.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Then you might actually have an audience, and then there's an audience that you're trying to reach, and you go, okay,
consider the perspective of
what do I
both
need to
of
do?
those,
So I mean, like, I think that the sort of, if we're trying to simplify it, A, understand yourself, B, understand your desired audience, okay? And then how do you connect the two? How do you make a resonant connection between the two? And what we were saying, earlier about musicians is like, well, you play something that sounds good and makes everybody feel good,
emotional response,
and engages them at that emotional gut level.
Yeah.
So then, what could you put on? What could you name your band? What could you put on the cover? What could you, what's it called? What is that
resonant thing? Okay, yeah.
Every single touch point from then on should be deliberately and consciously echoing that idea of resonance, or on brief with creating that resonant connection. That's what you're trying to do.
You know, you're just saying it now, but I've never really considered how much. I mean, it's so obvious, but I've never really considered how much the name of an act is branding. The act of branding, and it's
that's
like
your
it's
first branding
so stupidly
decision.
obvious.
Well, I mean, I think
and so many people have they changed, like people that are solo acts, they use completely different names that sound like actual names, and that being an older tradition, but it's just like I like the fact that Steve Morris' name is Stevie Wonder, and it's like that was a branding, and it worked really well.
Yep.
And it's like, so, and everything that came after that is like literally the wonder of his art that came from that. And it's like
the perfect name.
How much intention went into, just that name? Because it could have just been somebody saying, you know what sounds good. It could have been more than that. But even that little bit of intention gives a title to something that leads to, some of the best art produced.
Yes. So to that point, I think the name of your band or art, art, whatever, is your first branding decision, and it could be your most critical. And hence, and I've been known to talk about this before, but the first band I was in, which was called Jiminee, and so Say No More, that's not cool. So what you realise over a period of time. Context changes and everything like that.
Surely time move, yeah.
But when we started the band, it was called Jiminee, and then 5 years later, you just do not want to be in a band called Jiminee because you got older and you realised how uncool it was. So when we made up Jiminee, we didn't think. I didn't. It was Harriet from the Sundays. I'll always blame her. She was in the band, and then she named it Jiminee, and then she left. So I'm bitter. You can tell her if you meet her.
Beef.
But you're in the band. You think, oh, that doesn't matter, and then years later, we've built up a sort of big following in Germany and Europe, and we're still in a band called Jiminee. It's just I don't want to wake up and be in a band called Jiminee and go on stage and be in a band called Jiminee. Because it's like I'm a prat, whatever the word is.
Yeah.
I'm silly.
Gotcha.
I'm silly, and it's like you made a silly brand.
Now
and
you
then
you've got
to be
it.
silly
Yeah.
for 10 years later. It's like, don't feel silly today.
Right.
So
right.
one of the things and that's interesting that it was Harriet from the Sundays who named us, because I think I was even more aware of it, because then she went to a band and named it the Sundays, right? Which you could say is a bland as hell name. It doesn't.
Right, that's easy.
It's the biscuits
it's
or
not,
the wall.
Right, it's not inventive.
It's
You're
not inventive.
Stringing together nonsensible terms.
It's not inventive, but that's what's so brilliant about it.
Boom.
Because nobody knows what the Sundays sound like until you hear them, and then you go, okay, that's what the Sundays sound like. So then from that moment onwards, it's so simple to make that connection of their sound to, that's the Sundays, that's the Smiths.
Right. There's no preconceived notion that it could be.
Exactly, and you're not trying too hard, and the name is not actually telling you what to expect, which... If you want for long-term compatibility with everything, you want that.
Because you want to be able to have the wiggle room to, like, if you want to shift and change, you can. And
so, I think Social Cinema, I'm bringing that up because we're here, but that's a good name because it gets you to think about lots of things, but it does not tell me what the music is. It doesn't commit too far into down one road. So anyway, so I think if we're having a conversation about, like, if you haven't named your band yet,
right,
don't make it unless you always know that you're going to stay in this particular genre or this mood or whatever it is.
Right, right. Because I mean, Dream Theater, I think they're fully in for that ride, and so it'd be. I would wonder what they would rebrand as if they wanted to. Another thing I saw that you wrote up on was something called ethical branding. And I know as an artist, we tend to pride ourselves on our integrity and our bit of self-righteousness even. on the shadow side of it, but
Sure.
I know that we like to be honest, at least in what we're portraying to our audience, whether that's an honest illusion, it's still, as something that's a bit of honesty. It's a part of you that you're sharing. Is there a point where what you're sharing of yourself becomes dishonest and it becomes an unethical branding, or is there a line that you're able to notice as you're developing your brand and you start going into a territory where you're like, wait a minute, I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
How do you recognize that, and is there a way to recognize that even?
That's a very good question. Because the only way that I've spent about a quarter of a century now consulting for, in retrospect, global corporate, madness, if you like.
Right.
But the answer's always been to find. Actually, it was John Hegarty, who was a brilliant creative director.
You said Haggerty, not Fogarty.
Hegarty.
Okay.
So I was
going to say,
there's an advertising agency called Bartle Bogle Hegarty.
Okay.
And John Hegarty was the creative director. It's quite a famous agency. And he said that the goal of branding is to find a pearl of wisdom, a pearl of truth within the brand story or within the brand, and then to blow that up to if it's a good truth,
right,
and hold on to that and blow that up into a whole idea that you can hang your brand onto. So a lot of my life has been spent digging around big corporate brands trying to find something that's worth talking about. It's either true or it's worth talking about, or it's valuable in that. But it has to be true because especially in the modern age, everybody's so marketing savvy. You can't lie. So I mean, it'll come out in about 10 minutes if you start lying.
Right.
So I think that's a really good thing, actually. That in today's world there's such an accountability.
Absolutely.
So the ethical part of that is that there hasn't always been that.
There hasn't. Yeah.
And I really get sort of riled up when I see people abusing ethical branding or claiming to do ethical branding when they're actually it's just another way of obfuscating the fact that they're shafting you from behind.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of some. What was that? Sorry, I'm trying to think of water. There was a water brand that I was going to bring up. Ethos water. I don't know if we should be having a go at specific.
That name in and of itself.
Well, Ethos. So they created Ethos Water, and I don't know everything about it. So this is my perception. So the true story, they should go and tell the true story if it's better than my story.
Tell it.
But Ethos is like, okay, so we're going to, I used to pick up the bottle. Starbucks bought the brand, I think, and then started using it. And so it was the water originally you'd get in Starbucks.
Gotcha.
So you pick it up and you see all these black and white pictures of children in the developing world, and there'd be some statement saying, at some point we're going to give some of this money to them, or it's like these incredibly non-committal statements, like we promise to give up to 1% of the global profits
at the end of the year.
At the end of the year, it was just such a small.
From this division,
it was such a there was a non-committal, and yet all of the imagery, all of the brand imagery, was about
was about them doing that.
What they're doing for the third world sort of thing. It was just so insulting, so insulting, and so. I used to give these talks, to go around and give these talks about ethical branding and sort of highlight some of these, what I was seeing as injustices, things like that. And so there was that brand Think Pink, which probably isn't around now. That's probably a sort of 2000s type thing. It's called Think Pink, and Think Pink, and it's got it's the Susan B. Komen pink ribbon, and everyone's like, oh, I feel so good because
Breast cancer,
I'm not
yeah.
just eating chocolate, but somebody somewhere is benefiting from a fraction of my money that's going to some research.
Benefiting, yeah.
And it's just like, and so then I would say to people, what percentage of the price of the chocolate bar, what percentage should go to cancer research? And I'd ask the room, and they go like, I don't know, 20%, 25%, maybe 15%. And I'd say, oh, well, it's actually 1%. So that's completely abuse. I don't know if this is useful in the world of music, but
We're gonna find out.
It's such a, like, it breaks that trust because
It does, but
because
yeah.
you're getting everybody to go, oh, I feel good because I'm buying something that's pink, and then someone's, this is good, isn't it? And then it's like, no, they're taking the piss out of you. They're completely abusing.
And then you don't trust any
idea.
brands.
You don't trust anybody at that point.
Yeah.
So I think the trust issue which you brought up it's the biggest ever. I mean, in fact, branding goes back to the definition of branding comes obviously from branding cattle.
Sure.
And saying if this is cattle from my ranch, so first of all it's proof of ownership, but it's also at our ranch we feed them well and we look after them, and so you'll want this branded cattle.
Right.
You won't want theirs where they're cheapskates over there. They give them that cheap stuff. We feed them properly, or whatever it is that we do, and so this brand stands for ... So it's a trust. It's one of the original ideas of branding is to prove trust.
Gotcha. Wow.
It's a symbol of trust.
I've never thought about that the trust between cattle ranchers being, what is essentially the essence of branding. Like that's stupidly obvious, but it's something you've never thought about, and that's kind of the world of branding. Is a lot of things that that you've never made those connections before. And opening that world is is wild because there's always something new to discover as you're just researching about, okay, how do I do this? Oh, what's this? There's this new method, and I know there's no set template. There's no way to say, hey, this is what I've used before and it works every time.
No.
Boom, 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 boom.
No, because I think every audience is always going to be different. You'll be different. Time changes everything. There isn't a model. No. I think that's actually when I did study marketing at university. The only thing that I came away with that I thought was valuable was case studies, because we went and looked at lots of what happened there.
That's what happened.
You learn.
You can see in real time.
Because really, all of this is nothing more than applied common sense, right?
Sure.
So you don't have to get a degree. You don't have to know anything really. If you've got, like, I know lots of people who are brilliant at branding without even knowing that's what they're doing, because it's just they're smart. They go, oh, I bet you if I do this, then those people will want. Yes, that's right. It's just completely common sense. So there's no secret sauce. I don't think there is a secret sauce. It's just it's like you said, creative planning is the application of thought prior to doing something creative.
Yeah, right.
And that's all it is. That's all it is. It's just like, have a plan. Know why you're doing it. Be conscious. Be deliberate.
Surely.
and that is like that's that fact. I mean, that's the biggest truth right there, I think.
And then as artists, you enact the plan. You do what you set out to do, and you start making moves, and all of a sudden you find you've deviated somehow, or something knocks you off, or something that you started in the branding before. All of a sudden, it's like, I don't know, something happens in the world, and all of a sudden this symbol that you like to use, in your branding has been tainted by some event in the world.
Yes.
And you have to rebrand. Are there any large picture or small picture ideas you should focus on when you're rebranding? Are there any, like, when you have to rebrand, is there something you should do that's a big thing? Should you come out the gate like, okay, complete restructure, or should it be little bit by little bit? What do you see being more successful as a rebranding strategy?
Wow. It's quite a big question. I don't know if I don't have sort of set rules for rebranding.
Yeah.
One thing I would say about rebranding is if you don't have to do it, If you don't have to change your name, don't change your name. Which is all the more like, don't call yourself Jiminee then. But no, I mean that. It's like that's another reason to get it right the first time round.
Sure.
But then if you do find yourself in a situation, I think that you have to show humility. I mean, I think that the more that brands behave or like humans, that they have empathy and compassion, and that you can show there are people behind an idea, that they're human as well. The more we see that you can sort of see through to the heart of the decision maker, that transparency and accountability and honesty, that's where resonance happens. So if you are going through a rebranding process, maybe you expose the logic. You go, well, I'm having to do this because of this, and it's like, you know, be honest in public. It's like, don't pretend. It's like, I always wanted to be this rebrand. I always wanted. No, you didn't. You wouldn't have done this unless you had to. So be honest about that. It's like, I don't know why there's anything to hide ever, unless your brand is to be mysterious.
Right.
And then you go, okay, well, maybe at that
everyone
point,
in the band wears a mask, and you don't. They kind of have the same body type.
Exactly. Lost Slobos or Slipknot or whoever we have. Like, that's the mystery.
Guar.
Yeah, you know, there's value in the mystery behind the curtain to for some acts. Yeah. You know, that's what you're selling. But a lot of the times, as musicians and
like even Kiss with all their makeup, they'll do interviews out of makeup.
As soon as they took the makeup up, it's like, well, please, for God's sake, put it back on. It's not just the mystery's gone, but I do not want to look at your face.
But yeah, man. So Lindsay, thank you for coming on, man. This has been amazing. Every time I have a conversation with you about anything, I learn something, but specifically about branding, I'm just like, how have I never thought about that? It's
well,
so
you
many
ask
things.
amazing questions. You make branding more interesting because you ask good
It's a
questions.
new world to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm a little kid, and I'm like, ooh, the colors.
Yeah.
So,
love it.
So I'm just digging in, and thank you for bringing this knowledge to us. And this has been Midtopia Meets. I'm Marrque Nunley with Lindsay Jamieson.
Thank you.
Our branding extraordinaire. Yeah, I like that.
Ish.
Yeah. Love y'all. Peace.